Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today we are reading Holes. We are reading from page 64 all the way to 83, if I'm not mistaken. I can't see my screen. Nope, 82, which is okay. So we're reading chapter 14 to chapter 18, so this shouldn't be too bad. And yeah, let's begin. Chapter 14. That night, as Stanley lay in a scratchy and smelly cot, he tried to figure out what he would have done differently, but there was nothing he could do. For once, he was lucky in life. He was in the right place in the right time. It still didn't help him. "You got it?" he asked X-Ray the next morning at his breakfast. So X-Ray looked at him with half-open eyes behind his dirty eyelids. "I don't know what you're talking about," he grumbled. "You know," said Stanley. "No, I don't know," X-Ray snapped, "so just leave me alone, okay? I don't want to talk to you." Stanley didn't say another word. Mr. Sir marched the boys out of the lake, chewing some sunflower seeds along the way, spitting out shells. He scraped the ground with a boot heel. He marked where each boy was supposed to dig. Stanley stamped down on the back of the blade of the shovel, piercing the hard, dry earth. He couldn't figure out why X-Ray snapped at him. If he wasn't going to produce the tube, why didn't he make Stanley give it to him? Was he just going to keep it? The tube was gold in color, but Stanley didn't think it was real gold. The water truck came a little after sunrise. Stanley finished the last drop of water and stepped out of his hole. At the time of the day, Stanley sometimes could see some distant hills or mountain on the other side of the lake. They were only visible for a short while and would soon disappear behind the gaze of the heat and dirt. The truck stopped, and the dust of gold drifted past it. X-Ray took his place at the front of the line. Mr. Budensky filled his canteen. "Thanks, Mom," X-Ray said. He didn't mention the tube. Mr. Budensky filled all the canteens, then climbed back into the cab of their pickup. He still had to bring her water to Group E. Stanley could see him getting around 200 yards away. "Mr. Budensky!" X-Ray shouted from his hole. "Wait, Mr. Budensky, I think I might have found something." All the boys followed Mr. Budensky as he walked over to X-Ray's hole. Stanley could see the gold tube sticking out of some dirt on the end of X-Ray's shovel. Mr. Budensky examined it and took a long button. "I think the warden's gonna like this." "Does X-Ray get a day off?" asked Squid. "Just keep digging until someone says otherwise," Mr. Budensky said. Then he smiled. "But if I were you, Rex, I wouldn't dig too hard." Stanley watched the cloud and dust move across the lake to the cabin beneath the trees. The boys in Group E were just going to have to wait. It didn't take long for the pickup to return. Mr. Budensky stepped out of the cab. A tall woman with red hair stepped out of the passenger side. He looked even taller than she was, since Stanley was down in his hole. She wore the black cowboy hat and black cowboy boots were studded with turquoise stones. The sleeves on her shirt were rolled up and her arms were covered in freckles, as was her face. She walked right up to X-Ray. "This is where you found it?" "Yes, ma'am. Your good work will be rewarded." She turned to Mr. Budensky. "Drive X-Ray back to camp. Let him take a double shower and give him some clean clothes. But first, I want you to fill everyone's canteen." "I just filled them a little while ago," asked Mr. Budensky. The warden stared hard at him. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was soft. "I just filled them." Then Rex, "Excuse me," the warden said again. "Did I ask you when you last filled them?" "No, but I just—" "Excuse me." Mr. Budensky stopped talking. The warden wiggled her finger at him to come over. "It's hot and only been getting hotter," she said. "That's fine, boys have been working hard. Don't you think it might be possible that they can take a drink once you filled their last canteens?" Mr. Budensky said nothing. The warden turned to Stanley. "Caveman, will you come here, please?" Stanley was surprised how she knew his name. He had never seen her until she stepped out of the truck. He didn't even know the warden was a woman. He nervously went toward her. "Mr. Budensky and I have been having a discussion. Have you taken a drink since Mr. Budensky had filled your canteen?" Stanley did not want to cause any trouble for Mr. Budensky. "I've got plenty left," she said. "Excuse me?" He stopped. "Yeah, I drank some. Thank you. May I please see your canteen?" Stanley handed it to her. Her fingernails were painted dark red. He gently stroked the canteen, letting the water swish in the side of the plastic container. "Do you hear the empty spaces?" she asked. "Yes," said Mr. Budensky. "Then fill it," she said. "The next time I tell you to something, I expect you to do it without questioning my authority. It's too much trouble to fill a canteen. I'll give you a shovel. You can dig the hole and the caveman can fill your canteen." She turned back to Stanley. "I don't think that would be too much trouble for you, would it?" "No," said Stanley. "So what will it be?" she asked Mr. Budensky. "Do you want to fill canteens or do you want to dig?" "I'll fill the canteen," said Mr. Budensky. "Thank you." Chapter 15. Mr. Budensky filled the canteens. The warden got a pitchfork out of the back of a pickup. She poked it through X-Ray's dirt pile to see if there's anything else that might have been buried there as well. "After you drop off X-Ray, I want you to bring back 3 wheelbarrows," she said. X-Ray got in a pickup. As the truck pulled away, he leaned out the wide window and waved. "Zero," said the warden. "I want you to take over X-Ray's hole." But it seemed now that Zero was the fastest digger. "Armpit and Squid, you will keep digging where you have been," she said, "but you're each going to have a helper. Zigzag, you help Armpit. Magnet, you help Squid. And Caveman, you work with Zero. When you're done digging the dirt twice, Zero will dig it out of the hole, and Caveman will carefully shovel it into a wheelbarrow. Zigzag will do the same for Armpit and the same with the Magnet and Squid. You don't want to miss anything. If either of you find something, you'll both get the rest of the day off and a double shower. When the wheelbarrows are full, are you to dump them away from this area? We don't want any dirt piles to get in the way. The warden remained on our site for the remainder of the day, along with Mr. Budensky and Mr. Sir, who showed up after a while. Occasionally, Mr. Sir would leave to take the water to the other groups of campers, but otherwise, he and the water truck stayed parked here. The warden saw it fit that nobody in Group D was ever thirsty. Stanley did as he was told. He carefully looked through all the dirt and dug up by zero and shoveled it into the wheelbarrow. Though he knew he wouldn't find anything, it's easier than digging his own hole. Then the wheelbarrow was full. He took it at a great distance away before dumping it. The warden wouldn't keep still. She kept walking around over the boys' shoulders and sticking their pitchfork through the dirt piles. You're doing fine, just fine, she told Stanley. After a while, he told the boys to switch places so that Stanley, Zigzag, and Magnet dug the holes, and Zero, Armpit, and Squid shoveled the excavated dirt into the wheelbarrows. After lunch, Zero took over the digging again, and Stanley returned to the wheelbarrow. There's no hurry, the warden said several times. The main thing is not to miss anything. The boys still dug each hole until it was well over 6 feet deep and wide. Still, it was easier for 2 boys to dig 6-foot hole than it was for 1 boy to dig a 5-foot hole. All right, that's enough for today, said the warden. I've waited this long, I can't wait another day. Mr. Sir drove her back to the cabin. I wonder how she knew all our names, Stanley said as he walked up to the compound. She watches us all the time, said Zigzag. She's gotten hidden microphones and camera all over the place. But in the tents, the rec room, the shower. The shower? Asked Stanley. He wondered if Zigzag was just being paranoid. The cameras are tiny, said Armpit. No bigger than a toenail on your little toe. Stanley was in doubt about that. He didn't think they would make cameras that small. Microphones, maybe. He realized this is why X-Ray didn't want to talk to him about the gold tube at breakfast. X-Ray was afraid of the warden might be listening. One of them was certain. They weren't going to be just digging to build character. They were definitely looking for something. Whatever they were looking for, they were looking in the wrong place. Stanley gazed across the lake, toward the spot where he was digging yesterday and found the gold tube. He dug the hole into his memory. Chapter 16. As Stanley entered the rec room, he could hear X-Ray's voice from all the way across the room. See what I'm saying? X-Ray said, am I right or am I right? The other bodies in the room were a little more than bags of flesh and bones, dumped across the broken chairs and couches. X-Ray was full of life, laughing and waving his arms out as he talked. Yo, caveman, my man, he called out. Stanley made his way across the room. Hey, slide on over, Squid, said X-Ray. Make room for the caveman. Stanley crashed on the couch, then looked at the hidden camera in the shower. He hadn't said anything and hoped the warden hadn't either. What's the matter? Asked X-Ray. You guys tired or something? He laughed. Hey, keep it down, will you? Groaned Zigzag. I'm trying to watch TV. Stanley glanced uncertainly at Zigzag, who was staring intently at a busted television screen. The warden greeted the boys at breakfast the next morning and went with them to the holes. 4 dug in the holes and 3 tended to the wheelbarrows. Glad you're here, X-Ray, she said to him. But we need your sharp eyes. Stanley spent more time pushing the wheelbarrow than digging. Because he was such a slow digger, he carted away the excess dirt and dumped it into the previously dug holes. He was careful not to dump any of it in the hole where the gold tube was actually found. He could still see the tube in his mind. It seemed so familiar, but he couldn't find a place in it. He thought might have been a lid to a fancy gold pen. KB would have been the initials of a famous author. The only famous authors he could think were the Charles Dickens, William Shakespeare, and Mark Twain. Besides, it wasn't really like the top of a pen. By lunchtime, the warden had begun to lose her patience. They made them eat quickly so they could get back to work. If you can't get them to work any faster, she told Mr. Sir, then you're going to have to climb down there and dig with them. After that, everyone worked faster, especially when Mr. Sir was watching them. Stanley practically ran for when he pushed the wheelbarrow. Mr. Sir reminded him that they weren't Girl Scouts. They didn't quit digging until every other group had finished. Later, as Stanley sat sprawled across the understuffed chair, he tried to think of a way to tell the warden where the tube was really found, without getting himself or X-Ray into trouble. It didn't seem possible. He even thought about sneaking out at night and digging in that hole by himself. But the last thing he wanted to do after digging all day was to dig at night, too. Besides, the shovels were locked up at night, and presumably they couldn't be used as weapons. Mr. Budensky entered the rec room. Stanley called as he made his way to him. His name's Caveman, said X-Ray. Stanley, said Mr. Budensky. My name's Caveman, said Stanley. Well, I have a letter for someone named Stanley Yelnats, said Mr. Budensky. He turned over the envelope in his hand. It doesn't say Caveman anywhere. Thanks, Stanley said, taking it. It's from his mother. Who's it from? Squid asked. Your mother? Stanley put it in his big pocket in his pants. Are you just going to read it to us? Asked Armpit. Give him some space, said X-Ray. If Caveman doesn't want to read it to us, he doesn't have to. It's probably from his girlfriend. Stanley smiled. He read it later, after the other boys had gone to dinner. Dear Stanley, it was wonderful to hear from you. Your letter made me feel like one of the other moms who can't afford to spend their kids at summer camp. I know it's not the same, but I'm very proud of you for trying to make it the best of the bad situation. Who knows? Maybe something good will come out of this. Your father thinks this is real close to a breakthrough on his sneaker project. I hope so. The landlord's threatening to evict us because of the odor. I feel sorry for the little old lady who lived in the shoe. It must have smelled awful. Love from both of us. What's so funny? Zero asked. It startled him. He thought Zero had gone to dinner with the others. Nothing, just something my mom wrote. What'd she say? Zero asked. Nothing. Oh, sorry, said Zero. Well, see, my dad's trying to invent a way to recycle old sneakers. So the apartment kind of smells bad, because he's always cooking these old sneakers. So anyways, in the letter my mom wrote, he felt sorry for a little old lady who lived in the shoe. You know, because it must have smelled bad in there. Zero spoke blankly at him. You know, the nursery rhyme? Zero said nothing. You heard the nursery rhyme with the little old lady who lived in a shoe? No. Stanley was amazed. How's it go? Asked Zero. Didn't you ever watch Sesame Street? Stanley asked. Zero blankly, of course. Stanley headed on to dinner. He could have felt pretty silly reciting nursery rhymes at Camp Green Lake. Chapter 17. For the next week and a half, the boys continued digging around the area where X-Ray supposedly found the gold tube. They widened X-Ray's hole as well as the holes Armpit and Squid had been digging until the fourth day, when all three holes met and formed one big hole. As the days wore on, the warden came less and less patient. She arrived later in the morning and left earlier in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the boys continued to dig later and later. This is no bigger than it was when I left you yesterday, she said after arriving late one morning. Well, after sunrise. What have you been doing down here? Nothing, said Squid. It was the wrong thing to say. At just that moment, Armpit was turning from a bathroom break. How nice of you to join us, she said. And what have you been doing? I had to, go. The warden jabbed at Armpit with her pitchfork, knocking him backward into the big hole. The pitchfork left 3 holes in the front of his shirt, and 3 tiny spots of blood. You're giving these boys too much water, the warden told Mr. Budensky. She continued to dig until late afternoon, long after all the other groups had finished for the day. Stanley was down in the big hole, along with the other 6 boys. They had stopped using the wheelbarrows. He dug his shovel into the side of the hole. He scooped up some dirt and was raising it to the surface when Zigzag's shovel caught him in the side of the head. He collapsed. He wasn't sure if he was passed out or not. He looked up at Zigzag's wild head staring down at him. I ain't dragging that dirt up, Zigzag said. That's your dirt. Hey, Mom, Magnet said. Caveman's been hurt. Stanley threw out his fingers to the side of his neck. He felt his wet blood and pretty big gash just below his ear. Magnet helped Stanley to his feet, then up and out of the hole. Mr. Sir made a bandage out of pieces of sack and sunflower seeds and taped it over Stanley's wound. Then he told him to get back to work. This is the nap time. When Stanley returned to the hole, Zigzag was waiting for him. That's your dirt, Zigzag said. You have to dig it up. It's covering up my dirt. Stanley felt a little dizzy. You could see a small pile of dirt, which the moment realized it was dirt which had been shoveled he was hit. He scooped it up and Zigzag dug his shovel into the ground underneath, where Stanley's dirt had been. Chapter 18. The next morning, Mr. Sir marched the boys to another section of the lake, and each boy dug his own hole, 5 feet deep and 5 feet wide. Stanley was glad to be away from the big hole. At least now he knew how much he had to dig for the day. It was the relief not to have the other shovel swinging past his face, or the warden hanging around. He dug his shovel into the dirt, then slowly turned to dump it into a pile, and then made us turn smooth and slow. As he jerked too quickly, he felt a throbbing pain just above his neck where Zigzag's shovel had hit him. Part of his head, between his neck and ear, was considerably swollen. There's no mirrors in camp, but he imagined that he looked like he had a hard-boiled egg sticking out of him. The remainder of his body hardly hurt at all. His muscles had strengthened and his hands were tough, callous. He was still the slowest dig, but not all much slower than Magnet. Less than 30 minutes after Magnet returned to camp, Stanley spat into his hole. After his shower, he put dirty clothes in his crate and got out of his box of stationery. He stayed in the tent to write a letter so Squid and the other boys could make fun of him for writing to his mother. Dear Mom and Dad, camp is hard but challenging. We've been running obstacle courses and had to swim a long distance to the lake. Tomorrow we learn. He stopped writing to Zero as Zero walked in the tent and then returned to his letter. He didn't care about Zero thought. Zero was nobody. To rock climb, and that sounds crazy, but don't worry. Zero was standing beside her now, watching him write. Stanley turned and felt his neck throb. I don't like it when you read over my shoulder, okay? Zero said nothing. I'll be careful. It's not all fun and games here, but I think I'm getting a lot out of it. It builds some character. The other boys, I don't know how, said Zero. What? Can you teach me? Stanley didn't know what he was talking about. Teach you what? To rock climb? Zero stared at him with penetrated eyes. What? Said Stanley. He was hot, tired, and sore. I want to learn to read and write, said Zero. Stanley let a short laugh. He wasn't laughing at Zero, he was just surprised. All that because he thought Zero was reading over his shoulder. Sorry, he said. I don't know how to teach. After digging all day, he didn't have the strength to try to teach Zero to read and write. He needed to save his energy for people who counted. You don't have to teach me to write, said Zero, just to read. I don't have anybody to write to. Sorry, Stanley said again. His muscles and hands were only parts of his body that softened over the last several weeks. His heart had hardened as well. He finished his letter. He barely had enough moisture in his mouth to seal the stamp into the envelope. It seemed that no matter how much water he drank, he was always thirsty. The end. That is the end. That is the end of... I'm going to need to learn how to read that backwards, you know? That'd be a pretty cool talent, huh? Reading backwards. That sounds fun. Alrighty then. So, today we have read these many pages, and tomorrow we are going to read page 83 to page 100, and it's also the first move. Oh my goodness, I'm excited. It's the first move of the book. It's the second to last. Page 100 exactly. Fantastic. We could go a little further though. Hold on. Because page 100 was the next chapter. Page 104. Could we do that? I think we can, you know? Just a little bit under. So tomorrow is going to be 19 pages, but I don't think it's going to be that bad, all things considered. So I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. People like Be Official. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as a matter of fact, I don't know why this says one chapter is 20 pages when each chapter is a little different from the last. So maybe, just maybe, we can change that at some point, because I don't know why I have one chapter is 20 pages when sometimes I read books that have multiple chapters and I just like reading 20 pages at a time. Who knows? I might end up changing it. So yeah, I hope you guys have a fantastic, wonderful day. People like Be Official. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.